The Australian Financial Review.
There's a check mark. Did our decision desk make it? Arizona, 11 electoral votes?
Yes, we can.
Okay.
Late on US election night in 2020, Fox News made a remarkable and surprising decision. It called Arizona for Joe Biden, becoming the first news organisation to effectively say that Donald Trump was not getting a second term.
Arizona, are you 100% sure of that call and when you made it, and why did you make it?
Absolutely. We made it after basically a half hour of debating. Is it time yet? Because
it was a turning point in the election coverage and infuriated Trump, his advisors and his supporters, most of whom were devoted Fox News viewers.
I'm sorry, the president is not going to be able to take over and win enough votes to eliminate that 7-point lead.
The chaos that followed as ratings collapsed, primetime stars panicked, and Trump supporters came out in force would culminate in one of the most closely watched defamation cases in America.
So developing now, Dominion Voting has filed a $1.6 billion defamation lawsuit against Fox News.
Voting machine maker Dominion has accused the network of spreading conspiracy theories it knew to be wrong. Welcome to The Fin. I'm Lisa Murray. Today, senior writer Neil Chenoweth on the events leading up to the multi-billion-dollar legal battle and what it means for the Murdoch media empire. And reporter Mark Di Stefano tells us about the money and the PR machine behind the case. It's Thursday, April 13. Neil, you've been a long-time watcher of the Murdoch empire. You've written no less than 3 books on the Murdochs and are very well placed, I think, to tell us what's going on. So on Monday, Dominion Voting Systems will open its $1.6 billion defamation case against Fox Corp and Fox News over its reporting after the 2020 US presidential election. Why is this case so significant?
Well, this 5-week trial presents the biggest threat to the Murdoch empire since the phone hacking scandal back in Britain in 2011. It's not the only threat. Last month, the New York State Supreme Court also gave a green light for a separate $2.7 billion lawsuit from another voting machine company, Smartmatic, which will also proceed against Fox News at some subsequent time. If you put those two cases together, and they're basically the same case for both companies, that's $4.3 billion in damages that's at stake, even before any sort of further punitive awards may be made. So it offers one of those rare moments with the potential to trigger changes in power lines, not only in the Murdoch empire, but more broadly in US culture and in US defamation law. And it's so gripping. I mean, the raw inner workings of Murdoch's media empire are on display in a way that never been seen before. And it's all there in the emails and texts and the depositions. Rupert Murdoch discussing or instructing when to call the election, what his newspapers should be saying, revising editorials, picking up typos, reassuring Fox Corp directors. So even if Fox News wins the case, the brand has been trashed. But a win for Dominion would have major consequences for how Fox operates and the credibility of its senior management team, including Rupert Murdoch and his son and appointed successor, Lachlan. And as I said, it could also reset the way the defamation law operates in the state. The big unknown here is that no one knows how this jury is going to jump, and that's why Fox could still decide to settle this extraordinary case at the very last minute. But the stakes are so high for either side that so far neither side has linked.
So let's go back to the events leading up to this case, which, as you say, is riveting, and lots of emails and texts and written correspondence has come out, and we've had this real insight into how Fox operates. But let's go back to the start with that Arizona call. What happened after the Fox News decision desk called it for Biden?
This was a pretty chaotic time for Fox, and a lot of people were very fired up and they just didn't pull any punches. Now, this was a big call with Arizona, and there's been a lot of speculation about how involved the Murdochs were. And Murdoch biographer Michael Wolff in his book Landslide says that Lachlan was notified of the pending decision, and that he asked his father, who was in the UK, if he wanted to make the early call. And according to Wolf, he says, talking about Trump, quote, "Fuck him." We should point out that in his deposition, Rupert said he was not involved in making the Arizona call. What followed on from that call, though, was the best and worst of Fox News. And there was that early morning press conference.
We were getting ready to win this election.
Trump says, frankly, we did win this election.
We want all voting to stop.
And says, stop voting.
We don't want them to find any ballots at 4 o'clock in the morning and add them to the list. Okay.
And Fox host Chris Wallace pushes back and says, look, this is an extremely flammable situation.
And the president just threw a match into it.
He hasn't won these states. The president doesn't get to say he won states.
I don't know if he literally meant that he's going to try to stop the counting of the vote, but I would think that would be extremely inflammatory.
And Brett Baer, the Fox News' chief political anchor, texted saying, there's no evidence of fraud, none. Allegation stories, Twitter bullshit. And at the same time, Fox hosts were personally devastated by Trump's loss, and Rupert later spoke of Fox host Sean Hannity despairing. But this was nothing to the grief-fueled rage felt by Fox viewers triggered by the Arizona call.
And they're actually chanting, Fox News sucks. Fox News sucks. The reason why they're chanting that is because Fox News called Arizona for Biden yesterday.
And then the backlash started from Fox hosts, distressed at the anger directed at the channel.
At this stage, the fraud that we can confirm does not seem to be enough to alter the election results. We should be honest and tell you that. Of course, that could change.
The drop in ratings as viewers switched to tiny right-wing rivals Newsmax and One America News, and later the drop in Fox share price.
What about the arrogance of people saying the president can't get a recount or can't look into the allegations?
So a principled stand on election fraud claims turned into nasty infighting as Fox management looked to restrict the damage. By Thursday, November 5, senior Fox personnel were sharing these anguished quotes. They were saying, look, these viewers, they're saying, holy cow, our audience is mad at the network. They're furious. And Fox News host Tucker Carlson channeled his anger at the news desk. Quote, what Trump was good at is destroying things. He's the undisputed world champion of that. He could easily destroy us if we play it wrong, Tucker said. And that was the double bind that Fox News hosts like Carlson found themselves in. Carlson was ready to move on from Trump, but that risked losing his audience. And Rupert Murdoch, he was ready to move on. And Thursday's edition of the New York Post, under former Daily Telegraph editor Cole Allen, who's very close to Rupert, ran an article headlined, Downcast Trump Makes Baseless Election Fraud Claims in White House Address. And in fact, that article was meant to be a signal to Trump, as Murdoch Sr. intended it.
This is the United States of America. I can factually.
Yet that night, Sean Hannity told his viewers that
it will be impossible to ever know the true, fair, accurate election results.
That's a fact. So you can see the management of Fox trying to wind their hosts back in, but it was all a bit like playing whack-a-mole.
So there was confusion behind the scenes, and as you've just told us, the texts and emails and comments from the Fox hosts show this confusion playing out in real time. But at some point, Dominion, the voting machine maker, becomes a target of Fox News reporting. Explain how that came about.
It's quite a process. Now, to answer the question, you got to understand that Fox Business Network, it's like the ugly sister of Fox News. One of the more telling lines in Rupert Murdoch's deposition with Dominion lawyers in January was he said, look, he just didn't ever watch FBN. And that was unfortunate because FBN was where the harder stuff about Dominion came from. And FBM senior management seemed to see an opportunity to win over Fox News' unhappy viewers by airing the concerns of Trump supporters. So Maria Bartiromo, FBN's leading host.
Sidney Powell is General Michael Flynn's attorney. She is fighting on the front lines of this battle as part of the president's legal team. Sidney, good morning to you.
On Sunday, the 8th of November, she invited Sidney Powell, a former Texas district attorney, to appear on her morning show.
There has been a massive and coordinated effort to steal this election from we, the people of the United States of America.
Now, Powell was known for defending controversial former National Security Advisor Michael Flynn, and she was taking election fraud claims to a whole new level.
Sydney, we talked about the Dominion software. I know that there were voting irregularities. Tell me about that.
That is where the fraud took place, where they were flipping votes in the computer system or adding votes that did not exist.
The night before the interview, Powell forwarded an email to Bartiromo that had been sent to her just an hour earlier by Marlene Bourne. Now, Marlene Bourne is a Minnesota artist who makes what she calls cactus art using glitter and Swarovski crystals. Bourne said voting irregularities in a number of states had one common thread: Dominion voting systems, which provided electronic voting machines for 28 states in the 2020 election. And she said, the code is inserted in the Dominion software, which converted 3% of votes cast for Trump into votes for Biden. Mm-hmm. And then she went on to make a whole range of quite colourful claims. Like, for instance, she said that Roger Ailes, the founder of Fox News, huddled together most days with Mr. Murdoch and a handful of other non-US owners of major media assets to determine how best to portray Mr. Trump as badly as possible. Now, that's quite an intriguing scene there, particularly because Roger Ailes died 3 years beforehand. Mm-hmm. There were a number of other stuff that she claimed along those lines. And then she said, look, she had this extraordinary insight into Dominion because of these dreams she had, which were like time travel, where she would listen to the wind. Now, in her deposition, Bartiromo said that Powell had promised her a fire hose of documents and evidence to back up her explosive claims. But according to Dominion's filings, this Bourne email was the only actual document Powell provided to Bartiromo that day to pack up her astonishing claims about Dominion. And Bartiromo never disclosed that this was the basis of the claims. Dominion says the Bourne memo should have given Fox pause to question Powell's credibility.
And the story did take off from there. So after that sort of crucial starting interview, then what happened?
On the same show, Trump's personal lawyer, Rudy Giuliani, was on the same page as Powell, telling FBN viewers this is probably the most crooked election ever run anywhere, and that the fact that these claims had been made, then they were now mainstream. They'd put pressure on other Fox hosts to pursue the same line. And day after day, Lou Dobbs, Bartiromo, Sean Hannity and others kept hosting guests who amplified the claims about Dominion, who said it was a huge criminal conspiracy and that it had secured contracts in 26 states through bribes. Now Trump repeated the claims against Dominion, but this was after Fox News had reported them, according to Dominion's claim. Mm-hmm. Now, in his deposition, Rupert Murdoch said, "We report the news, and we've dozens of people a day on the channels that are talking about the news, and this was big news. The President of the United States was making wild claims, but that's news." But as the emails and texts that have come out of part of this case show, at this time, many of Fox's biggest stars were panicking. By mid-November, Fox's daytime ratings were down 34%, and its primetime audience was down 37% from the election. And the legal troubles for Fox were about to get even bigger.
More from Neil Chenoweth after the break. Neil, you've just mentioned that Fox's legal troubles were about to get bigger. Explain how a $1.6 billion case became potentially a $4.3 billion case.
Thursday, November 12, that's 4 days after the first Dominion claims were made, Rudy Giuliani, you remember he was the former mayor of New York, former assistant district attorney of New York before that. He went on the Lou Dobbs show on FBN with a new conspiracy theory, because the Dominion voting was actually a subsidiary of another company called Smartmatic.
And they're not sent to Canada, they're sent to Germany and Spain. And the company counting it is not Dominion, it's Smartmatic, which is a company...
And Giuliani said of Smartmatic, he claimed that Smartmatic was actually formed by 3 Venezuelans who were very close to the dictator Hugo Chavez.
That's their expertise, how to fix elections. They did it a number of times in Venezuela, they did it in Argentina, and they messed up an election.
And that the company was specifically formed in order to fix elections. And Lisa, he also said, It was a criminal conspiracy and people should be put in prison for it. And of course, none of this was true. It's extraordinary. Smartmatic had no link to Dominion, which was actually owned by Staple Street Capital Management, a private equity firm based 4 blocks away from Fox News in Manhattan, not Venezuela. Smartmatic's only role in the election was to provide voting machines in just one Los Angeles county. Now, Fox News had a fact-checking unit called the Brain Room that reported these errors, but it was ignored and later it was dismantled. And the thing is about this, one legal effect of claiming that Smartmatic owned and controlled Dominion is that anything you're damaging, you're essentially saying that they're the same entity. So anything damaging you say about one company is now just as damaging to the other company. So you've just got 2 large corporations who are both able to bring their own damages claim for the same broadcasts.
So, Neil, Dominion actually had no link to Smartmatic. Dominion is owned by private equity firm Staple Street, as you say. Mark Di Stefano's actually been reporting on that firm, and I spoke to him earlier in the week. Hi, Mark. We're days away from this court case, so I'm very keen to talk to you about who's behind it. Thanks for joining us.
So good to be here. Thanks, Lisa.
So, Mark, there's a lot of focus on this case. Tell us who's behind the scenes, and in particular, how is the PR war playing out?
There is this private equity firm called Staple Street, which owns Dominion, and they're a pretty, unremarkable private equity firm. They're not sort of some, firm that you hear about all the time, but they took out an investment and they bought Dominion back in 2018. Dominion had a CEO that was the front man facing, a lot of the complaints, but actually the Staple Street founders and the guys that had their money in this company, they were very supportive of Dominion pushing back really hard. And so there's been this sort of since 2021 when the first defamation proceeding was started, their actual private equity backers have sort of turned this into a bit of a crusade. They've also brought in like a really high-powered PR firm based in Washington called Hamilton Place Strategies, and now it's been renamed to Penta Group. What Penta Group and Dominion and Staple Street have done is they've made it very, very easy to report on this case if you're a journalist. They send out these emails off the back of rulings with PDFs attached and links to a Dropbox account where all of the evidence, we're talking thousands and thousands of pages of evidence, are all there so you can access. And I think it's a real difference compared to the Fox Corporation strategy. They send out these long emails with, color-coded terms and bolded things. And I think one of the reasons why this is so interesting and important to the case is because there's what's happening in the courtroom, but then there's also the spin war. And I think that what we're finding is that there's really professional outfits that are running rings around the Murdochs.
So it's a $1.6 billion damages claim. Are Dominion and their owners just throwing out the biggest number they can think of? Or is there some basis to this figure?
It's actually one of the text messages as it came out during the deposition was a friend of a Staple Street banker had texted his friend that it would be amazing if you guys 20x'd your investment with these lawsuits. And that was presented from the Fox lawyers as, see, this is the greedy Staple Street that are after this huge number. And so they've put this financial expert up that has calculated, essentially split it into 2. So Dominion has said we will, have lost because of this campaign against us upwards of several $100 million. And then the secondary part of that $1.6 billion is lost enterprise value.
Thanks for joining us, Mark.
Thanks, Lisa.
So, Neil, it's a big money case. How is Fox planning on defending itself?
Well, the heart of Dominion's case is that it claims that if Fox took fringe conspiracy theories that it knew weren't true and ran them anyway just to save their profits base. And in the process, the false claims became mainstream. Now, from November 12, Dominion had started sending emails to Fox News hosts, to their producers, to bookers, to line managers, to senior management every day, pointing out the true facts. In all, Dominion sent 3,500 emails. Executive David Clark received so many that he wrote to a colleague, I have it tattooed on my body at this point. Now, Fox News has 4 defences. First of all, it says Dominion is just making its case from cherry-picking quotes out of context. It says its coverage was protected as neutral reporting, which is what Rupert Murdoch meant when he was saying they were just covering the news. Secondly, that it was reporting a legal case, which also offers protection. Thirdly, that it was opinion, and no one is going to think that it's fact, that it was, because it was just the host's opinion.
Mm-hmm.
And then fourthly, and most of all, it's covered by the free speech provisions of the First Amendment of the US Constitution.
So, Neil, let's look at that in a bit more detail. Unlike in Australia, defamation cases are really hard to win in the US, but you've had this lineup of experts coming out in the media and suggesting that Dominion could have a good case here. Why is that?
Defamation is extremely hard to prove in American law. To do it, you have to show that what was written about you or broadcast about you was motivated by actual malice.
Mm-hmm.
Now, actual malice doesn't mean that perhaps what we understand it to mean in common speech. It is the knowledge that what you're saying is not true or that it is unlikely to be true. If you can convincingly say, look, I was wrong and I was stupid, but that's what I believed, then the First Amendment covers you there.
Mm-hmm.
Now, in a pre-trial judgment on March 31, which was quite unhelpful for Fox News, Judge Davis in the Superior Court in this case ruled that, first of all, he said the evidence developed in this civil proceeding demonstrates that it's crystal clear that none of the statements relating to Dominion about the 2020 election are true. So
crystal clear.
Yep. So all of the stuff that was broadcast was false. Well, Fox News says that Dominion was cherry-picking quotes out of context. Davis went through the broadcasts and kind of picked this claim apart in his judgment. He's found that even with extra content supplied by Fox, it's not neutral reporting, as Fox claims. Secondly, Davis said that Fox couldn't claim any protection because it was reporting a legal case because the lawsuit hadn't actually taken place yet, so it's not covered by that stuff. Thirdly, he went through it and said these weren't just opinions, what people believe, because they were actually presented as fact.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that leaves Fox with its last defence, which is also its strongest, that its reporting was protected by free speech. Fox says Dobb, Bartiromo and others testified in the deposition that they believed the allegations, which made it acceptable free speech. And that's where it gets hard for Dominion. They have to show actual malice, that Fox knowingly spread false information or did so with reckless disregard for the truth.
Mm-hmm.
But a surprising number of senior law professors and media lawyers in the US have said it's a tough standard to meet, but if any case is going to meet that hurdle, this is the one.
So in recent days, we've also had a ruling that suggests the Murdochs, Rupert and Lachlan, will have to testify as part of this case, or could have to testify. Taking a longer-term view, Neil, and putting your Murdoch Empire watching hat on, what does this case mean for the media company and for Fox News and the way it's run?
The question is whether this will ever come to a settlement. The Murdochs have not been averse to making settlements in the past. There was a case with Charlie Ergen at EchoStar, which was, it seemed to be worth about $1.2 billion in a complicated case. News Corp settled with News American Marketing claims for $500 million in the last 10 years. The phone hacking in the UK, lots of different claims, but I mean the total bill has ticked over $1 billion, I think, in the last year or so, as the claims continue to come in. But still, making peace with Dominion will not come cheap, and it's a question of whether they feel lucky.
Mm-hmm.
And Lisa, just as an aside, if you ask how the Fox News audience is going to respond to this, well, you know, the Fox News share price was back up to its heights within about a week of the election fall. Their profitability continues to rise.
Mm-hmm.
And as you see Trump making his 2024 bid, you can see Trump's turning to Fox, and that whole alliance between the Trump supporters and Fox News seems to be as strong as it always was. Sometimes in a legal case, the best possible outcome is simply that you emerge with the least possible damage.
Mm-hmm.
So if there's a possible winner here, it might be Lachlan. Unlike almost anyone else in this case, he has extensive experience being on the stand because of the whole OneTel saga, the liquidators hearings, and then the Joe Rich trial. He's had his own baptism of fire about cross-examination, and he's pretty good at that. He's good at staying on message. And that's, I think, why there's not much said about him in the Dominion lawsuit. As for his father, Rupert Murdoch has made his reputation about the superb ability he has to control newspapers, to run newspapers well. And here, it's hard to think that this whole post-election coverage was nothing more than a management fiasco for Fox News, and that eats into Rupert Murdoch's credibility. Now, he's got a long history of being able to control newspapers, being able to control newspaper editors. The thing that Rupert Murdoch can't control is what jurors say, what jurors think, and what jurors decide. And this is where this case is going to be so really, really interesting.
Thanks, Neil.
Thanks, Lisa.
Here's the other big stories we're covering this week. The housing slump is over for Sydney and Melbourne, according to 4 property data research firms: CoreLogic, SQM Research, PropTrack and RBC Capital Markets all predict house prices have bottomed out in the 2 biggest housing markets. While rising interest rates are still a drag on house prices, they say the record return of migrants after the pandemic will bolster prices. And EY has scrapped plans to split up the company following months of turmoil at the professional services firm and a backlash from its US executives. EY has stopped working on what it had called Project Everest, which would have separated the firm into auditing and consulting businesses. The abrupt decision leaves it in strategic disarray and will probably result in a leadership shake-up and the defection of partners and staff to rivals. Thank you for listening to The Fin. I'm Lisa Murray, with Neil Chenoweth and Mark Di Stefano reporting today. The Fin is produced by Alex Gow and Lap Fan. Fiona Buffini is the executive producer. Our theme is by Alex Gow. If you like the show and want to hear more, follow us wherever you get your podcasts, and consider rating and reviewing us as it helps others find us. For more stories about markets, business and power, subscribe to the Financial Review at afr.com/subscribe. See you next week.
The Australian Financial Review.